Hello there everyone, and welcome to today's video here on my channel. If you can't tell by my background going on right here, this video is going to be completely dedicated to the wonderful Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I started reading Throne of Glass back in March. I was one of those people that was so late on the bandwagon, almost about 4 years late from when Throne of Glass was originally released, and so I wasn't a part of the huge bandwagon fiasco of this fandom, but now that I have fully read the entire series aside from the Assassin's Blade, I am so happy that I jumped on this bandwagon while it's still going. Like I said in a bunch of previous videos I've done here on my channel, I wanted to catch up on the Throne of Glass series before EOS came out, Empire of Storms, just because I wanted the hype of this series. I wanted to feel it so much ever since I read Throne of Glass and just like really understood the hype about these books. And now that I have finally finished Queen of Shadows, I finished it last weekend, I am so happy that I've been able to be here with the excitement, and it's so awesome. So this is going to be a spoiler-free review for the entire Throne of Glass series. I'm not going to really get in depth on some of the later books because I don't want to spoil anyone for anyone who hasn't read them yet, even though if you haven't read them yet, I highly recommend. So this is going to be a completely non-spoiler review for the lovely Throne of Glass series, so feel free to stay if you have read them or if you haven't read them so you can know my thoughts on these books. So if you don't already know, the story starts with Throne of Glass, and this is a story about a young assassin called Celaena Sardothien. And at the very beginning of this book, she is in the salt mines of Endovir, which is like the slave camp in this mystical land. This is also a high fantasy, so there are lots of fantasy elements, there are lots of mythical elements, and it is very unlike an urban fantasy like the Mortal Instruments. But so Celaena Sardothien is known for being like one of the continent's most world-renowned assassins, and she grew up in the Assassin's Guild, and she is currently in the salt mine. Until one day the captain of the royal guard comes to the salt mines and gets her out, and she then realizes that the prince of the continent has decided to choose her to take place in the competition to become the king's champion. So Celaena enters the competition and she has to compete against 20 of the world's best assassins, thieves, and criminals. And if she wins this competition, she has to serve the king for 6 years, and then after the 6 years are over, she can finally have her freedom that she hasn't had in a long time since she's been in the salt mines. This book was one of the most mind-blowing books I've ever read. There's a feeling you get when you read a book that has a lot of hype, and you kind of go in thinking it's going to be amazing, and then sometimes it's not as good as you want it, so it kind of lets you down even more. But this book, like, I knew there was hype, and I went in with thinking there was hype, and then I was so amazed because the hype wasn't even enough to explain how much I loved this. The best part about this entire series to me has to be the characters. I just think all the characters are so unique and they're so just different, but they're also really real. We have Celaena, who is our main character, and she's just really sassy, but she's also kind of cruel at some times. She could be really sarcastic, and then we even get into parts where she is on her period within this book, and I just think that added an extra element that we've never seen even in contemporary books, and it's something that happens to everyone but just never gets put into literature. And then we have the two main guys which are introduced in the first book, and that is Chaol and Dorian. Chaol is the captain of the guard that went to go rescue her from the Endovir salt mines to get her out, and Dorian is the prince who enters her in the King's Champion competition. And at the very beginning, you see that these two are kind of the love interests for her, but then throughout the series we develop more love interests and we kind of set you on a path that's unexpected for where this series is going. But just let me put it out there, I am Team Dorian, and I've read all the books and I'm still Team Dorian, so... But then we also have great side characters in this book, like Nox, who is another competitor in the King's Champion competition, and then one of my favorite characters, Nehemia, who is the princess of this other continent place, and she comes to the palace and she befriends Celaena, and it's just a really good dynamic that they have, and I loved that in this book. Basically, like, my review or like summary for this book is it's the Tri-Wizard tournament but involving assassins, and the like tasks are more higher stakes, and it's just great. I think this book is hilarious. I think it is super action-packed. I think it's fast-paced. I think it's a really good high fantasy, and it's a great start to an amazing series. So as we continue on with the series, like I said, I don't want to get into spoilers because this is a non-spoiler review, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of my thoughts on the rest of the series. I read Crown of Midnight right after I read Throne of Glass. This one I did think was a little slower paced than Throne of Glass for me, just because we're not in the whole of the competition uproar that was in Throne of Glass, but I thought this book was even a little bit better. I remember I gave Throne of Glass a 5 out of 5 stars, and then I went on Goodreads and gave this like a 5.5 out of 5 stars because I just thought it exceeded all my expectations, and I loved this book. In this book, we get to delve deeper into some of the characters' development, and we get to see more secrets unfold, and we really get to build the fantasy world a lot more than we did in Throne of Glass, and things start to click, and I loved that element of it. And then we get to Heir of Fire, which at this point in the series is kind of my least favorite, just because I thought it was the most slow paced to me, but I still really enjoyed it, and I still gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The only reason I think this is the most slow paced is it's more of like building up, and there's not a lot of action that happens in this book, but I still thought it was great. We get introduced to a bunch of new characters that I thought just bring a lot to the series, especially Manon. I'm gonna say that because that's not a spoiler, but there is a character named Manon, and she is a witch, and she like flies dragons, and I just think she added a lot to the story, and I think she's a really interesting character with an interesting dynamic, and she plays well opposite Selena. I'm trying really hard not to spoil anything for this just so I can keep this non-spoilery, but we do get a lot of extra characters that I thought really enhanced the story in this book. We also dive even deeper into the whole magic series when Crown of Midnight kind of left you with a lot of questions, but they do get answered in this book and in Queen of Shadows. So if you get halfway through the series and stop because you're really confused, I swear keep going. It'll get better and better, and your questions will be answered. The character development in this book was some of the best character development I've ever seen from main characters. I just think the journey Selena has taken on this series is some of the best character development I've ever seen. She has completely evolved from where we started off in Throne of Glass, and I just love to see her character grow and grow. Oh, it's so good. And then we have Queen of Shadows, which is my favorite of all of the Throne of Glass books. I read this book last month and I finished it last weekend, and I loved this book so much. I do still think that Aquamath is my favorite Sarah J. Maas book of all time, but this one is second best because I just think this book was like exactly what I wanted and what I expected, but then I was even more surprised when I read it. This is the biggest out of the entire series, and I'm so happy it was because not a single second in this entire book was I bored, was I feeling it was slow paced. I thought every scene had some kind of action or some kind of plot connection, so there wasn't any filler pages or any wasted pages. In this book, you get to see the extreme depth of Selena's character, and it is so breathtaking how much she's changed and how much she's able to evolve into who she is now, and it's so great. Our other characters also get to evolve throughout the series, and even more characters are introduced in this book, and we get to create a squad in this book, and we have our squad, and we're going to take over the world, and it's going to be so awesome. Some of the action events that occurred in Queen of Shadows are some of the most amazing books that I've ever read in literature, and it's just so mind-blowing that I was able to experience this because some of the feelings I felt throughout Queen of Shadows I've never felt before, and I just loved how it made me feel and how amazing it was to read it. I'm going to go into a little bit of a spoiler right now, so if you haven't read Queen of Shadows, just mute the screen until this book disappears from my shoulder. Some of my favorite parts of Queen of Shadows, I have to mention these just because I love them so much, are the dinner at Arabid's house when we end up killing him. I just think that was great, and how we did it was amazing. All the plans that Selena planned but then didn't tell the reader until they already went swimmingly, I just think that added a whole extra length, it added so much more suspense to the story than I was expecting, and I thought it was brilliantly done. The character development of Dorian was amazing. I love Dorian. He is my ship, Dory Lynn. I love him. I just think he's one of the best characters I've ever read of in any book ever. And even though he was in like the worst position in his entire life in this series, or in this book, I just think he was able to deal with it, and he came out and he's going to be the King of Ardalan, and I love that so much. Manon and Elaid chapters. I didn't really like Manon that much in Heir of Fire, but then we got to Queen of Shadows, and I love Manon. I also think Elaid is like one of the coolest characters, and I love their dynamic, and I just think they're gonna go awesome places. The witches, oh. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Rowan, I do really like him, but I don't like him with Aelin. That's just my personal opinion. Feel free to disagree with me. I do really like the scene where they go to the theater and play piano, and he gets to learn how to play piano. I just think it was a really nice connection he had with her, and I love that part. And then finally, my favorite part was the very ending with Dorian and Aelin, when they were eternity and infinity, and they were the beginning and the end. Oh my gosh. I was reading a Sarah J. Maas interview, and she talks about how she loves foreshadowing and she loves knowing the ending from the very beginning, and I'm just... Dorian has to be endgame. Please. So given that there are only 5 more days until EOS comes out, Empire of Storms, the 5th book in the amazing Throne of Glass series, I thought I would just tell you some of my favorite things about the Throne of Glass series. I love the covers. The covers of these books are some of the most beautiful covers to me ever. I really do think the ACOTAR and ACOMAF covers are not some of the best, just in comparison to the Throne of Glass series. I was trying to think which cover is my favorite, and I actually think Empire of Storms is my absolute favorite. I just think the contrast in the colors is the best, but I do think Assassin's Blade is amazing. I haven't read this one yet, but I'm going to be reading it next, I think, before Empire of Storms comes out. I just love this cover. Second is Queen of Shadows, though, because I just think that is a perfect portrayal of what goes down in Queen of Shadows. Another thing that I love about the Throne of Glass series is the imagery, especially the costumes. I remember reading Throne of Glass, and when she goes to this big ball, she wears this big silver ball gown, and it made me want to wear that for my senior prom, and so I'm currently looking for one to wear to my senior prom, and I'm gonna go to prom as Selena Sardathian. It's gonna be awesome. Another thing I love is the characters. The characters in the series are some of my favorite characters ever. I love them so much. I don't want to get into any spoilers, so I'm not going to tell you what any of them are or who they are in relation to Selena, but I'm just going to name off a couple of the characters for the people who have read the books. Selena, Dorian, Aedion, Manon, Elaid, Lysandra. Those are my favorite characters in this entire series. Also Nehemia. I forgot about Nehemia. I love Nehemia so much. Series has some of my favorite villains. Even though some of these villains are the most terrifying of all the villains, I think they are amazing, and I love to hate them because they are gruesome and terrible. And the fan art for this book is some of the most amazing fan art ever. On Tumblr and Google fan art for this series, it's some of the most amazing stuff ever, and I love it. It's just people's art skills and the characters. It just creates such a vivid image, and it's amazing. I'll make sure to link some of my favorite fan art down in the description down below if you want to check that out. Sarah J. Maas is an amazing author. She's been getting a lot of hate on the internet for things that happened in Empire of Storms, and I do not want to deal with that. I think Sarah J. Maas is an amazing author. I think she's a great person and just an amazing storyteller, and I love her books, and I'm so happy that she got to live her dream, and I'm so happy that I get to read her books because I think they're amazing pieces of art. So that is it for my spoiler-free review of the Throne of Glass series. If you've read these books and you really want to say anything to me or talk about them, let's talk down in the comments, and yeah. If you want to know any of my theories and opinions about what is going to happen in Empire of Storms, there is a live show with me and some of my close booktube friends over on Mila Gabrielle's channel. I'll make sure to link that live show down below in the description down below. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up down below, and in the comments let me know any of your thoughts on the Throne of Glass, or if you haven't read them yet, you really should. I highly recommend them. Tell me who's your favorite character in the Throne of Glass series. Mine is Dorian, but also Selena. And if you want to and you haven't already, you can always click subscribe. I make new videos here on my channel every week about bookish things, so click subscribe if you want to join me. And thank you all for watching. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are in the world. Don't forget to be infinite. Never ending. Bye!